Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mormonish. I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Landon, and we have a really interesting guest today.
We absolutely do have a really interesting guest. So we have the amazing Ron Yorgason in the house. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, I can't get over your studio. That is incredible. And it'll make sense in a minute when I explain what's going on. So Ron is a friend of ours. I met him actually in the same way that I met Landon on Reddit.
Make a
I know
habit
it
of
sounds
it.
a little suspicious. That's right. No, I was scrolling around ex-Mormon Reddit, and I focused in on some kind of a post. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was very interesting. And I made a comment back, and Ron and I started kind of chatting back and forth, and I realized that he's a person that has a great knowledge of church history and some of the more obscure and unusual details and stories, which was very intriguing to me. So of course, we made him join our book club at the Good Book Club. We do that to everybody we encounter, and we got to know him a little bit better in that way. And he himself is starting an amazing TikTok channel called Masterpiece Mormonism, and hence, yes, that it all makes sense now, right? In fact, are you wearing a cravat, Ron?
I am wearing a cravat here. I've got a smoking jacket and a fake Mormon approved pipe.
And a fake Mormon approved. You are decked out. So this TikTok channel is going to feature amazing shorts about Mormon topics, and just anyway, we'll let Ron talk a little more about that later. And that is ready to launch. But before he gets too big and launches into the stratosphere, we thought we would have him on Mormonish with us. And because it is, I guess I'll call it Valentine's season, because we're not exactly sure when this is going to air yet, we thought that we would have Ron tell us, I guess maybe I should say regale us with some stories and have a discussion about the many, what would you call it, Landon, loves of Joseph Smith, romantic encounters, wives, and not just that, but the other side of it, which is, what exactly did Emma think about all of this? We don't always hear her side of the story. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today with the amazing Ron. So tell us, Ron, how you got interested in this particular subject, Emma's point of view.
That's a fascinating question. As I'm studying all of this Mormon history and this Mormon polygamy and everything else, and I'm like, I need to write a book. And so I'm starting to figure out how I want to write a kind of a romance novel type theme on the kind of the historically as accurate as possible as I can make a novel about Nauvoo and everything that goes on there.
And there's a lot there. There's a lot.
A lot.
It might have to be a trilogy, if not more.
Yes. I'm planning a trilogy right now. So, but I wanted to do it from Emma's point of view, because it's kind of a more interesting artifact of kind of Emma's reaction and her role in the Relief Society, and the woman's point of view of what's going on in Nauvoo, all the gossip and fun things that are happening, and all of that kind of stuff. So this presentation is kind of right up where I want my book to kind of cover. So this is right up. This is what I want. So
that's awesome. So we're kind of the first ones to see this land, and this is kind of exciting, right? We're in on the ground floor.
This will be interesting. He was telling me about this, that he wanted to write a love novel of Joseph Smith, and I was like, well, a romance novel of Joseph Smith? That almost is an oxymoron. But I guess it's just like any, a love-hate relationship that a lot of post-Mormons have with him. So you either love him or you hate him.
That's right. That's exactly it. So, well, excellent. We're really excited to hear the information and just kind of discuss and learn more. This is going to be fascinating. So whenever you're ready, let's just start, and we'll just talk. It'll be great.
So the first experience we have is with Fanny Alger, and she is in Kirtland. And we don't have a whole lot of resources that are contemporary of what's going on. So a lot of what we have is mixed information coming decades after. And so you got to take a lot of this story with kind of a grain of salt. Everyone's kind of familiar with Fanny getting caught in the barn with Joseph. And I'll read a couple of quotes here. but I'll kind of, but we were in Kirtland, Kirtland, Ohio. It's 1834, 35. We don't even have a good year for what's going on. We have the Doctrine and Covenants revelation on monogamy that comes out, written by Oliver Cowdery about August 1835. And he's saying, as we've been accused of polygamy, this is kind of the we believe in monogamy type of thing.
Right, so they're protesting too much. Thou doth protest too much. That's it.
So I suspect this incident where things went south may have happened just shortly before that. Then Fanny gets kind of kicked out, and she goes off with her family, leaves Kirtland like the next year in 1836, and she marries somebody and kind of drops off the face of Mormonism. And I think later in life, someone asks her what happened with her and Joseph, and she's like, "That's for my own personal information. I'm not going to share." So we really don't even have anything from her, and it's kind of frustrating from a historical point of view. But this is a letter from William McClellan to Joseph Smith III, July 1872, and he says, "Now, Joseph, I will relate to you some history and refer to your own dear mother for the truth. You will probably remember that I visited your mother and family in 1847 and held a lengthy conversation with her, retired in the mansion house in Nauvoo. I did not ask her to tell, but I told her some stories I had heard, and as she told me whether I was properly informed. Dr. F.G. Williams practiced with me in Clay County, Missouri during the latter part of 1838, and he told me that at your birth, your father committed an act with a Miss Hill, a hired girl. We don't know who Miss Hill is, because this quote kind of goes on. There's a different story with Fanny, so we don't know anything about this Miss Hill.
This is a letter. This is a letter written about Emma. Then,
yes, wow. I think trying to convince a little Joseph Smith polygamy, because Joseph was third was all about his parents Joseph not being involved with polygamy. So he's trying to say, you don't know what your parents were up to.
Yes. So this Miss Hill was prior to Fanny Alger or after?
It sounds at your birth, your father committed an act with a Miss Hill. So I think Joseph III was born 1835-ish, close 1834.
The same time frame.
I don't have that right in front of me, so I can't for sure.
But similar time frame. That's very interesting as Fanny. So, and it couldn't be referring to Fanny, just using the wrong name. No, because it's pretty clear she's
right next. He goes. He called in a Dr. Williams, Oliver Cowdery, and Sydney Rigdon to reconcile Emma, but she told them the circumstances that took place. He found he was caught. He confessed humbly and begged forgiveness. Emma and all forgave him. She told me the story was true. Again, I told her I heard the one night she missed Joseph and Fanny Alger. She went to the barn and saw Fanny in the barn together, alone. She looked through a crack and saw the transaction. She told me this too was verily true." So there's two separate stories that he's telling. I think a lot of times we kind of merge these two together. But that's his letter to Fanny.
Yeah, I have never heard of the Miss Hill. Yeah. Have you, Landon, at all? No. That is really interesting.
And at this time, 1834, he'd been married to Emma 5 years. I think they got married when did they get married? It was right
1829.
Or they got the plates, right? So yeah, right in the
January. Oh, you're right, 5-ish,
17th-ish.
My goodness.
Yeah.
But according to this letter, she forgave him.
Yeah. So then we have Annie Eliza Young. I'm not even sure she was alive at the time, but she's famous for being married to Brigham Young. And then she divorced him and then wrote a big expose, wife number 19.
Yes.
Thing, and then went around warning everybody about how horrible polygamy was in Utah. But she knows because when Fanny was kicked out, she went to go live with Eliza's family, her parents. So she says it was felt that Emma certainly must have had some very good reason for her action of kicking Fanny out. By degrees, it became whispered about that Joseph's love for his adopted daughter was by no means a paternal affection, and his wife, discovering the fact, at once took measures to place the girl beyond his reach. Since Emma refused decidedly to allow her to remain in her house, my mother offered to take her until she could be sent to her relatives.
Wow, you said something interesting there. Adopted daughter.
She kind of confuses the state of Fanny. So Fanny's parents were alive, but she's staying with the Smiths, kind of like hiring out as a maid type of thing. So she wasn't an orphan. She wasn't really adopted, but they kind of brought her into their house and took care of her. They treated her much like a daughter. So I think that's what she's referring to her as here.
Okay.
Right. And that happened over and over, bringing people in and sort of adopting them into the fold. That's very interesting.
It's a mode of operandus, I think.
Kind of
I'm
is,
actually
yeah.
sitting here. Oh, you can't see that, but I'm making tick marks here for how many. We're up to 3 at this point. That
Talking
you've
about the loves.
Yes, other than Emma. So
Other than Emma. Okay. Put Emma on one side and then put,
that's right.
and we'll see who wins in the end.
Yes. So then another famous quote here was with Oliver Cowdery. He was involved somehow and he knew what was going on. So like with Fanny Hill or Miss Hill, they say Oliver Cowdery came in along with Sydney to kind of calm Emma down and help her sort things out. So this might have happened with Fanny or something along those lines, but he knew what was going on. And he writes to his brother concerning this indignation at Smith's relationship with Alger. Cowdery said he discussed with Smith the dirty, nasty, filthy affair of his and Fanny Alger's, in which I strictly declared that I never deserted from the truth of the matter, as I had supposed was admitted by himself. And this was to Lauren A. Cowdery in January 21st, 1838.
And
So
I think that's the oft repeated line, the dirty, filthy, nasty. I think we hear that quite often about that.
And
And
in
the actual-
1838, he's the first counselor, or actually co-president, I think, one of those co-president of the church. So
Oliver?
Yeah, Oliver was. So that, this is coming from someone in the first presidency, basically, is saying this guy is not, he's having these affairs. He's being with these women. And so either Joseph is a liar or Oliver's a liar, but either way, someone in the first presidency.
Either way is problematic.
It's problematic, yes.
So I think Oliver's in Missouri at this time. They had the big banking fiasco, and Oliver's name was on the I think he was the treasurer or something. His name was on the list, so he fled to Missouri early on. So I think So Joseph, all of 1838 is going to be a big fiasco with the banking thing, and Joseph ends up fleeing. With Fanny Alger, there's this great fake novel cover by Obvious Plant called "Meet Me in the Sex Barn" by Oliver Juices. So this is actually the inspiration for what I wanted to write, a kind of a romance novel for this. So like, someone needs to write a novel based on this actual thing. So my book won't actually be a bodice ripper like this cover represents, but.
So that's where you came up with the idea to write a novel about this, is because you saw this cover and just said there's got to be a story to go inside that cover.
Exactly. I saw this, like, this sounds just like Fanny Alger, and someone needs to write this book. And months go by, and like, someone needs to write this book, and like, oh, fine, I'll write the book.
Well, and I have to say that Ron does text Landon and I notes and ideas, and seriously, if the book gets written, this is going to be good, because you're just able to pull out these details that no one else knows. So.
All right, so we've got I'll try to skim through quickly the timeline to bring us up to spring of 1842. This is where spring of 1842 is when things really start heating up with Emma and polygamy. So just kind of in the sake of not spending a whole year on polygamy, we'll just kind of skip through a good chunk of things. So January of 1838, Joseph flees Kirtland to Missouri because of the bank failure lawsuits. March of 1838, Joseph and Cindy arrive in Missouri. April 12th, 1838, Oliver Cowdery and David Whitmer get excommunicated. So they get to Missouri. The leaders, some people aren't happy with them as leaders. So like all the Whitmer brothers are excommunicated. Then the witnesses, Oliver and David, get excommunicated. And one of the items on the list of charges against him was accusations against Joseph Smith for polygamy. So this is that letter that got him.
What was it? Was it an accusation of polygamy or I thought it was accusation of adultery.
Adultery, excuse me.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Right.
It was adultery.
Well, a lot of people refer to adultery as polygamy. So,
starting in June 1838, Joseph and Sidney really stir up this big, violent rhetoric. The salt sermon from Sidney threatens all the apostates. So Oliver and the Whitmer brothers are all threatened to leave town with the Danites and everything. And this escalates to the Missouri War with all the neighbors. They attack some towns and loot them. And then, it all goes bad. Governor Boggs gets tired of the Mormons. 1838 issues an extermination order. And that term is actually comes from one of the sermons that Sidney Rigdon gave. I think it's a 4th of July sermon where he threatens all the heathens, all the Gentiles, that if they attack them, then we'll fight them a war of extermination. So we have Governor Boggs using this extermination rhetoric again back at them that they used. November 1st, 1838, Joseph surrenders. December 1838 through April 1839, Joseph spends in Liberty Jail, and that's kind of a miserable place. But they kind of do the trial, or at least the beginning of a trial, and then give the grand jury, I think is what it was. But they file for relocation, and they get it approved, and then they escape during the prison transfer. And it could be because things were looking bad. Missouri was getting a lot of flack in the rest of the country news for kicking out the Mormons. So they're like, we just kind of want this thing out of here. Just let him escape.
Yeah.
So I think Joseph buys a horse from one of the guards and they go off and escape. All right. So between January and April 1839, a lot of the people are gathering in Quincy, Illinois. They invite him in and take good care of him. And so when Joseph escapes from jail, he goes off to meet them in Quincy, spends a couple of weeks there, finalizes a land purchase in Commerce, Illinois. That is first deal closes on May 1st of 1839. And then May 10th of 1839, Joseph moves into the old homestead. So it was a cabin that existed in the Nauvoo territory, Commerce territory. It's not called Nauvoo yet. And so they lived there for the first several years. And then things get interesting. John Bennett hears about, he's kind of been on the periphery of Mormonism. He's been in Kirtland, kind of met some people there, and he wasn't all that impressed with them. But once he finds out that they're getting kicked out of Missouri and they're starting a new thing, he's like, I have a lot of expertise. I can help these guys out, and then I'll be glorious. He's kind of this Napoleon guy. He wants to, all of his poses, he's got a hand in his shirt here, trying to be like Napoleon. And so he wants to gain this great notoriety. So he comes to town. He knows all the people in Springfield, Illinois, all the politicians, the schmooze. And so he gets this charter greased really easily. Everyone's trying to curry favor with the Mormons because they know there's thousands of people are about to come in and they want them all to vote for them. So they're all falling over themselves at who can appease the Mormons the most. Everyone's so impressed with John Bennett, including Joseph Smith. Joseph has him moved in with his house, and he lives with them for 39 weeks. So they become bosom buddies. They're like everywhere together. But in February 1st, 1840, he becomes the mayor. November 7th, 1841, he joins the first presidency. Sidney Rigdon's kind of sick from all the malaria stuff. So he jumps in until Sidney's better. And then spring of 1842, we have rumors of spiritual wifery. And this is where everything gets exciting. So before
you go there, 1842, the last the last one was 1835.
4 or 5.
So he was clean for a couple of years. Is that what we're saying? Or we just don't know? Was there any rumors in between that time, or is there just a break?
So there's in Missouri, he's living with the Harrises, Lucinda Harris. She was the widow of the big anti-Masonic guy who wrote a big anti-Mason book expose. So
Morgan.
he's staying with
His
Morgan,
last name was Morgan. Yep.
So he's staying with this couple for a couple of months before they kind of get their own place. There may have been something in there. We don't really have a good marriage date for her. So, but there may have been something while he was staying with them there. Interestingly, when they was in Quincy, Emma was staying with Miss Cleveland. I think it was Sarah Cleveland. I'll have it up in my notes here in a minute. But he ends up marrying her shortly thereafter. I think in 1841, 42, somewhere in there. He marries. I think it was 1842. I'll have it up. So he's marrying everywhere he's going. He's staying with somebody, and he's like, "Oh, you're nice. I'm going to marry your wife, and I'll marry your wife."
So this spiritual wifery starts in 1842. The rumors start, but he's actually been practicing prior to then.
Or was he just meeting them and then after the fact going back and making them his wife?
There's accounts of him grooming young girls.
Right.
I think the young girls who escaped with Doctrine and Covenants in their skirts as they flee in Missouri. Book of Commandments, I guess it was back then. So she says that he told her when she's young, like 12, that someday she's going to be his wife, that God's revealed it to him. So we have kind of this thing going on. When I bring up the list of wives here, we'll show the dates and when they're married to. But there's a few marriages in 1841, but I guess it's not really leaking out until Bennett is not as quiet and secretive about things. So I have a couple of slides here on some pictures with the old homestead that they moved into. The first one is kind of a recent picture. It shows kind of a restored version of the cabin. The finished, the nice paneled siding side was added later by Joseph Smith III. There was like a little extension on the back. It was like a little 2-story small log cabin, but he had people crammed in here all the time. For when they first get to Nauvoo, that people are so sick and dying everywhere. This place like a hospital because one of the few buildings around, and they were close to the water. They thought the malaria, the bad air, was causing people to get sick. So they thought maybe if we move them closer to the river, the air won't be as bad as the swampy stench inland. Then I have an old photo. This is kind of the oldest photo I could find. I'm not sure a date on it, but it shows a really old picture of the old homestead. Okay, list of Joseph's wives. So we have a few. I kind of broke this up into two groups. In August of 1842, Joseph is on the run from Boggs for the assassination attempt. So he's got warrants out for him. So he spends like the next 4 months in and out of hiding, and there aren't any marriages there. So we go up to like August 1842. With
it's hard to date when you're on the run. I think we all know that. So.
He seems to be doing fine with his wives that he already found. We'll go over some of that later.
How many does he have at that point?
August of 1842. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13.
Need toes.
16, 17.
Already up to that point.
Yeah.
By 1842, he has 17 already.
So by the end of 1841, he starts out with Louisa Beeman in April of 1841. It's kind of slow. He's kind of getting his feet wet. He's getting the city up and running. October of 1841, he marries Zina Huntington Jacobs, who's now just recently married. And then he marries her sister in December, Presendia, and she's also married. And then, so now he starts picking up. So it goes December 1841, and then January 1842, he's marrying his brother's wife, Don Carlos. There we go.
Yeah, it's his it's his widow, right?
Yeah, Don Carlos
His brother's
dies,
dead, and it's his widow that he marries.
and we'll see Agnes come in later. She makes some interesting stories later on.
So within a 2-year-ish period, 16. So one every other month.
Yeah, he does 2 in February of 1842, at least 1 in March, at least 1 in April, and then we have 3 more that happened before June, another one that happened before July. Then there's Eliza Snows in June, Sarah Ann Whitney's in July, and Martha Knight's in August. So,
well, and doing Emma, 2 weddings or 3 weddings at a time makes sense. Anyone who's had to put a wedding together knows if you can get the kids and get more of them together, it's a lot cheaper.
I think we're joking because it's so uncomfortable. I mean, it's just the tragedy of it.
Yes.
I mean, so what Emma at this point, does she have an inkling? Does she have any idea? Is it on the radar, or is he just stealth in all this that he's doing?
In February 1842, there's rumors coming up about Joseph and Agnes. So there's something going on that she knows there, but she doesn't. The revelation, or Joseph convinces her in spring of 1843 that his marriages are supposed to be polygamous, and he spends a while convincing her. He buys her a horse. Says, hey, if I'll buy
that'll do it. And we're talking by convincing the revelation, we're talking section 132. He reveals that
comes in August.
Oh, that's a little later. So he presents it to her and then has a revelation to back it up.
Yes. So in the spring of 1843, she agrees that he can marry some girls if she can pick them out, and so she agrees to have him marry the Partridge sisters and the Lawrence sisters, who are both pairs are living inside their home.
So we see the pattern again. It's young girls living in his home, working as domestic aides, who are already familiar with Emma. And if I'm correct, Partridge Sisters, he already was married to them and remarried them, right?
Yeah, he married them first in March, and then they do a second wedding for him after Emma agrees, I think in May.
Did she ever find out that was a fake
we don't
wedding?
have the record.
We don't know. I just wonder about that, because that's insult to injury. I mean, that is so calculating, and everyone was in on it, and she was duped, and she was the one that was a fool. I've always thought about that. When she found that out, that must have hurt more than even some of the other things.
Lucy Walker was also another girl who was living in their home. Joseph brought her in after the mom died, and then sent the dad away on a mission. So Lucy's
and all her brothers and sisters farmed them out to other families and stuff. Because he said he would take care of the family if the father would go on the mission. And then he farmed out all the kids and kept the daughter.
He kept a couple of the older ones. The younger ones he stuck somewhere else. And then he proposed to Lucy. I don't know what happened to the older siblings. I have to do some more research on that. Things kind of calmed down by August of 1843. His last real wedding of a young girl was in September of 1843 with Melissa Lott. He has one more wedding with Fanny Young, who is Brigham Young's sister. That's probably more of a binding marriage, kind of link, a dynastic marriage,
right,
to link Young's family to him. He also does one with Rhoda Richards. She was 58 in June of 1843. So he has some of these older women that he kind of marries as favorites to kind of bind these people to him.
That's the story anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that, don't you think it's possible that I've got all these younger women, let me try some older women, and that it wasn't more than just, a binding.
I'm 57 and a half. So I am saying, you know,
Yes.
We don't want to get into ageism here.
it
Sorry
doesn't
about
have to be the end of the world. It's interesting. I don't know. His motivations were all over the place, but I think a lot of faithful members that I talked to, you know, and I believe this too, I think, is that most of it was, you know, kind of the law of adoption or dynastic or, you know, all of that. It was all ever to care for the widows. You hear that a lot. So there are all these explanations, but then you dig a little deeper and you say these just don't fit, especially the women that were already married. I mean, they didn't need to be cared for. They had husbands unless they were sent on a mission. And so it kind of falls
And
apart.
through the law of adoption, he could have sealed the families by adopting the men, like he did. John Lee
The
was
head
an
of the family.
adopted son of Brigham Young,
Yeah.
had
So
sealed through that
Brigham
law of
Young started
adoption.
the-
He could have done the same thing with the men and
Yeah.
bound the families together without having to marry the women. So
Right.
the whole thing just doesn't add up when you start talking about, you see a pattern and you keep seeing that pattern, and then all of a sudden the revelation comes out way down the line after he's already, you know, married to
Acting
many
on
of
it.
these
Yeah.
women. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Brigham Young started the law of adoption. I couldn't find anything with Joseph Smith doing
Oh,
anything, but
okay.
Brigham Young definitely did that for
Okay.
several decades. But some of these older women were used as groomers. They would call them mothers in Israel. Elizabeth Durfee was definitely one of these people who would kind of talk to the younger women, find out what they're comfortable with, and then kind of introduce them to the idea of polygamy, and then bring them into Joseph and say, "Hey, they're ready to be married to you," type of thing.
Oh, that's so similar to a current situation with Keith Raniere, right? And the Nixvium cult, if anyone's familiar with that, they had different
Yes.
levels and tiers of women that would, you know, befriend younger women, and then exactly that, find out, I think this person might be comfortable, you might be talked into it. So wow, it's very interesting to hear about it, and absolutely tragic.
So the first real record I have of Emma reacting to this polygamy is with when she gets put in charge of the Relief Society. So Sarah Kimball her husband's not a member. They were living in commerce already when they bought the land, so the Mormons kind of came in. But her idea was to start this women's society, and she actually did get proposed by Joseph Smith, but she turned him down. But we'll see a lot of the other Relief Society women are all getting proposed to or married. So Joseph, on March 17th, 1842, the first Relief Society is organized. Joseph Smith gives them this charge, says in the notes or the minutes, President Smith, Elders Taylor and Richards returned, and the meeting was addressed by President Smith to illustrate the object of the society, that the sisters of the Society of Sisters might provoke the brethren to good works and looking to the wants of the poor, searching after the objects of charity and administering to their wants, to assist by correcting the morals and strengthening the virtues of the female community, and save the elders the trouble of rebuking, that they may give their time to other duties in their public teaching. So they're going to kind of be monitoring the women themselves, so the brethren don't have to tell them what to do, which is kind of an interesting view. But Emma takes this charge very seriously, being in charge of the moral fabric of society. And she uses this a lot to try to fight against polygamy over the next couple of years.
But at that, what was that year again? What year did you say that was?
That was March 17th, 1842.
1842. So at this point, though, well, I guess you said it was spring 1843 before she finally agreed to initially, I guess, buy into it, or at least play along for a while.
Begrudgingly, for a horse.
Yes, for a horse. Probably a horse named Mercedes.
Yes,
Emma loved horses. She was actually a very good rider. So she really liked the horse. I think she even ride the horses with parades next to Joseph Smith. So she would, whenever they would do like the temple ceremony or the laying of the foundation, cornerstone, they had a big parade for that, and Emma's right up front with Joseph and riding her horse. So she was an excellent horseman.
Wow. But so you were asking Landon, when the Relief Society started, if she had already agreed. to let things happen. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going, but I think he said 1843, the spring of 1843 is when he convinced her, but the Relief Society had started in 1842.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is right around the time that John C. Bennett's things are going on. And so she's going to be kind of using this position in Relief Society to kind of argue against the spiritual wife racist that they're hearing. So I have a nice picture of the first Relief Society. There's 20 women in there, and of this 20, there are going to be 6 that are married to Joseph Smith. One of them will have her daughter married to Joseph, and 2 others will have been proposed to but turned down. So Nancy Rigdon is here. She turns Joseph down. Sarah Kimball turns him down. She's in the Relief Society. Well, she's not in the presidency, but she was her idea to start it. Sarah Cleveland is in the counselor. Whitney is the mother. She's in the first presidency. She's one of the counselors. And then Eliza Arsenault is the secretary. So all these women that are in this presidency either are married directly to Joseph Smith or have family related married to him.
Yeah, our ward dropped off a flyer a couple of years ago for the birthday of Relief Society, and it had an actual picture, not just a drawing of some of the members of the first presidency, and with their names. And I thought, I looked everybody up just to make sure, and yes, every single one but one were wives of Joseph Smith. And I thought, I really doubt that anyone passing out that flyer knew that scenario. I'm sure they didn't, because it was happy birthday and here are all these women. And I just thought, oh my goodness, just really sad.
So yeah, in the Utah period, Eliza Arsenault becomes Relief Society president. I think Zina Huntington is also in the presidency and maybe even a president. So they're kind of this Mormon female royalty. There's an interesting book. I can't remember the title of it. It's like The Women. But the author is completely gushing over these analyzing like, oh, there's fabulous priestess of Mormon portraits.
Are you saying they were the Kardashians of the pioneer era? Is that what it was? Okay. Yeah. And did Emma, did she know? Was she just suspicious? I mean, what was she thinking about the other women in the Relief Society? Was she just kind of blocking it out, what she really suspected, or did she really know?
Well, let's dive in. The very second episode of meeting of Relief Society, there are rumors started by Clarissa Marvel. She sees Joseph Smith going in and out of Agnes Smith's house, his brother's widow. So she's seeing this going on, and she starts telling other people, and these rumors are starting. And so March 24th, 1842, the minutes say, President Emma Smith rose and read from the Book of Mormon, or the Book of Records, the proceedings of the first meeting of the society. She then proceeded to read the honorable body a report wherein Clarissa Marvel was accused of scandalous falsehoods on the character of President Joseph Smith, without the least provocation, praying that they would in wisdom adopt some plan to bring her to repentance. She said she presumed that most society knew more about Clarissa Marvel than herself. Miss Agnes Smith said Clarissa Marvel had lived with her for nearly a year, and she had seen nothing amiss with her. Agnes has no idea that these rumors are involving her. They don't mention the names. Notes later and other records.
Put it together. Okay.
So she's like, I know Clarissa very well. There's nothing wrong with her.
So that's an interesting pattern. When somebody brings something up to attack them personally. Have we seen this pattern before ever? I'm not sure.
Emma is very protective of the Smith family name. And even when there's things that are going wrong, she's very much there to fight to protect it.
So she believed it. She didn't put it past him, but she thought, we got to nip this. So we're just going to attack the messenger and make sure nobody gives it any credibility.
Yeah. We'll see some of this later on. In a couple of months, John C. Bennett gets his excommunication hearing, and there's also William Smith that's involved in these rumors and stories of witnesses they're bringing in. telling him that yes, John C. Bennett was there. Yes, William Smith was there. And Joseph Smith stands up and says, "Stop this right now. I will not hear my family name slandered one more minute." So Brigham Young lets William Smith off of the excommunication. The story is that Emma told Joseph Smith to do this, that it was damaging the Smith name, the family. So that's the story where that comes from. So yeah, she was very much all about protecting the family and the good name and stomping out these rumors. Anything that made her family look bad, she was there to stomp it out.
Okay.
All right, so Counselor Elizabeth Ann Whitney proposed that someone be appointed to go and labor with her and possible reform her. Moved and carried that Miss Markham be one to go and converse with Clarissa Marvel. Mrs. Markham objected on the ground that she was unacquainted with the circumstances. If you've ever been in a meeting where they're trying to get you to go do something and you're like, I don't know, don't send me. Like,
I'm not gonna. And it sounds much nicer when you say, "I am unacquainted with these circumstances. I don't think I can." Doesn't that sound much nicer way to decline?
President Smith said that would make no difference. She could attend to it and that it should be done in a private manner with great prudence. Miss President continued by saying that if we intend to look to the morals of each other and watch over each other, that she intended to walk circumspectly and to shun the appearance of evil. All are required to be very careful in their words and actions at all times. She said she believed that Clarissa Marvel might be reformed. Mrs.
They were spying on each other. That was kind of one of the
this is exactly what it
main
is.
points of the Relief Society. You had to keep an eye on each other.
Yeah.
I get that. I live in a cul-de-sac in Utah County, so
there are a lot of stories later on in the Utah period of the home teachers being sent to go investigate and find out what these people are doing. So there's a lot of stories with that. President Smith says she has no parents. She's under our care and observation. She needs friends. So this sounds
that's the beginning of the friendshipping, huh?
Yeah.
This sounds very much
friends like that. Who needs enemies?
Many word councils sound just like this. So the next week, March 30th of 1842, Emma wants an update. Emma says she'd like to hear from those appointed to inquire into the case of Clarissa Marvel. Diantha Billings said we visited her, questioned her closely. She appeared like an innocent girl. Mrs. Markham corroborated the statement of Mrs. Billings. President Emma Smith said, we are called upon to find the origin of the report, so she's not going to let this slide. So the people that are sent, like, oh, well, she seems fine to us, but she's like, we're going to dig in.
Not good enough.
Yeah.
And there was no one to corroborate her story. You would think a lot of people would have seen him going into Agnes's house, but it was only Clarissa that was brave enough, or maybe didn't understand if she was younger, the dynamics of what she was involved in. And she was the one that said, like the emperor's new clothes, no, I saw him.
Yes.
How many women were involved in this inquiry? Because you've got the Relief Society presidency, they're reporting back not just to Emma, but to the presidency, right? And the presidency themselves are involved in this.
This is the whole Relief Society meeting. So the first meeting they're adding people each time. So the first meeting was 20 some odd people. Then the next one might be 30 people, and they're adding new people each meeting. So they're all hearing the same. This is just open Relief Society conversation. It's not a private presidency meeting or something.
Wow.
So let's see. So she's not happy with the results, so she sends two more people. Sarah Cleveland proposed the rumor be tracked out and the innocents cleared. Mrs. Gribble said Laura Jones and Hannah Burgess have reported against Clarissa Marvel, so we have two more witnesses against Clarissa. So Counselor Whitney motioned that two persons be appointed to see L. Jones and H.B. carried unanimously. Counselor Cleveland motioned that Miss Allred and Miss Elizabeth Davis Durfee be appointed to see them and cite them and appear at the next meeting. Mrs. Durfee objected. President Emma Smith said, we're going to learn new things and our way was straight. Said we want none in this society but those who could walk straight and were determined to do good and not evil. Said that Mrs. Durfee must serve unless she can provide a better person to officiate in her stead. So again, Durfee is someone's trying to get out of going on this witch hunt, and Miss Emma Smith is determined to make him go.
Because they all knew it was a sham, right? Everybody had to have recognized that it was just they're playing a game. Do you think, or did people not know?
I think they're uncomfortable doing this. They're not happy with this.
Right.
But Emma's taken this charge to root out
Yeah.
wickedness and take care of the morals of society. So
I just have a hard time. This is not a large community by any means. What, maybe 2,000 people in Nauvoo at this time?
two or
And
three,
yet
something like that.
you've got John C. Bennett doing this. You've got Joseph Smith doing this. You've got all these women that are involved, at least 16 of them. Some of their husbands are a part of this. This word had to have been out. You've got to think everybody in town knows about this at this point.
Not everybody.
It's weird that some don't know and some do know.
They're determined to keep secrets, and this is where the masonry comes in. So I'll read a letter, an excerpt of a letter that Joseph reads to the women here in one of the following meetings. But this is the whole point of masonry and the endowment is to teach people how to keep a secret. Joseph is tired of people turning on him and revealing things that his inside plans are. Like in Missouri, he had 2 apostles that turned against him and wrote affidavits to the governor. And that's what got them part of the extermination order. So he's really tired of people just kind of turning against him. So he's trying to get these really strong, firm commitments, teaching the people how to keep secrets. And
maybe
all that.
If he wasn't stealing their wives, they might not turn on him.
No, it's an environment of secrecy for sure, and it permeates everything, and it continues, until today. So it's very interesting. That's how it started.
Yeah. All right, so let's clear up this. Let's finalize this Clarissa Marvel story. April 14th, 1842. So this is 2 weeks later. Counselor Cleveland arose and addressed the meeting, informing them the case of Clarissa Marvel had been satisfactorily settled, she having testified in her own handwriting that she said no wrong, and Mrs. C continued by cautioning the society against speaking evil of President Joseph Smith and his companion, that it would not be a light thing in the sight of God, that they had proved themselves in the case of Clarissa Marvel should be a warning how we hear and how we speak, and expressed her fears that the Lord would cut off those who will not take counsel, etc. So this whole thing is definitely a warning. Like, this is how we're going to react. If you're going to spread rumors, we're going to come after you. We're going to track you down. We're going to send a bunch of sisters after you. So don't spread rumors. So Emma Smith stands up after this and addressed them, saying that the disagreeable business of searching out those that were iniquitous seemed to fall on her, that it was an unpleasant task, but it was her desire to do good, and wished all members of society to assist her. Said it was necessary to begin at home, eradicate all evil from our hearts, and warn all those who wish to join with us to some calculating and to divest themselves of every wrong thing, and unite and expose iniquity, to search it out and put it away. She said the society had other duties to attend than seeking the wants of the poor, exhorted members to so conduct themselves, blah, 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 enforce the necessity of walking the manner that we had probated of God. So again, this is my responsibility. We have to make sure everyone is on the up and up. And if you talk against us, we will come after you.
Kind of makes me understand why Brigham Young shut it all down eventually.
It gets worse in 1844 because she goes full bore against it. So just kind of skipping along, let's give it a little more context. So between May 1842 and August 1842, we have May 14th, Governor Boggs is assassinated. June 15th, John Bennett's excommunicated. June 29th, Joseph marries Eliza Snow. July 13th, Bennett publishes the Martha Brotherton affidavit. This is where Martha Brotherton is locked in Joseph Smith's office as they try to convince her to marry Brigham Young. She manages to convince them to let her leave, that she'll pray about it after a couple hours being trapped in there. And then she writes this whole experience down. John Bennett gets it and publishes it. So July 13th, there's definitely a big thing going on in the news with Martha Brotherton. July 15th, Bennett publishes a controversy with Joseph and Sarah Pratt. So Joseph tried to hit on Sarah Pratt a couple of times while her husband Orson Pratt was away on a mission. He came back and she warned him, like, if you got to try this again, I'm going to tell my husband on you. And Joseph tried again after her husband came back, and she told him, and now he's upset. There was like a worry about him going off in the woods and committing suicide. He was torn apart for months, and he was kind of cast out of the 12 because he didn't back up Joseph Smith against these rumors. Finally, October of 1842, he says, he publishes an account saying, we're not going to leave the church, we're going to stay in, type of thing. So that was a very short version of that story. July 27th, Joseph marries Sarah Ann Whitney. Then somewhere around this time, Bennett tells Boggs that Joseph sent an assassin. So Boggs is assassinated, tried to be assassinated, got shot twice in the head, survived somehow with medical facilities back then. Is amazing.
It was meant to be.
Yeah. But Bennett says, like, this Joseph guy, he swore that you would die within a year of some horrible death. And Porter Rockwell was sent to go fulfill revelation or fulfill prophecy. So then the warrants come. This is what sends Joseph into hiding. So August 10th, Joseph goes off into hiding. He finds out about these warrants. Actually, I think they try to arrest him. They do use the habeas corpus rules to get out of it in Nauvoo. And then the people are like, what's this? I've never heard of this. How do I deal with this? So they go off and find out how they're supposed to react to this. And then Joseph goes off and hides at John Smith's house, his uncle, north of Nauvoo. And then for the next several months, he's in and out of hiding.
There are so many inspiring hiding stories. Like
Yes.
when I was in primary, when the kids would get up to tell inspiring stories, it was all about some ancestor that had hidden Joseph Smith in all these different places, in the closet, in the bed. And it's always a faith promoting story. And just so many hiding stories. This explains it.
Yes. So August 13th, Eliza R. Snow moves in with the Smiths at Emma's invitation. So she was staying with, I want to say the Clevelands, probably in Quincy, because they're going to start moving in just down the street from the Smiths. But while they're doing that, Emma invites her in. So she and Eliza are really good friends. She has no idea that Eliza is married to her husband just a couple months ago. But she and Eliza are working very diligently to try to write to the governor of Illinois to fight against these warrants and things. August 19th, Bennett publishes the Nancy Rigdon happiness letter. So this is all coming in again while Joseph is in hiding, and all these controversies. It's just being flooded because Bennett knew all the inside information. He was right there in the first presidency, and I suspect that Joseph tried to offer him a deal at the beginning, where if he got caught, he would let him off. Well, he makes a deal kind of with William Clayton. I'll cast you out and give you a good scolding, then I'll let you right back in, right as rain or whatever. And then, so when Joseph is doing this kind of excommunication, or they're meeting in the Mason Lodge, and he's asking him, did I ever teach you this? Did any of this ever come from me? And he's like, oh no, you're innocent of this. But then I think either Emma's insistence that Joseph keep fighting against Bennett, or jealousy among the other apostles on how close Bennett was with Smith, that he's really fully kicked out and he's not welcome at all. So then he's like, well, shoot, I'm going to go on this rampage. I'll tell you everybody what you guys are doing, so you'll rue the day that you kicked me out.
He knows where all the bodies are buried.
He does.
And now he's going to tell, because he's not in the inner circle anymore.
Yes.
All of this hiding is really quite a brilliant plan, because, when the husbands catch him in the closet, the wife can just say, oh, we're hiding the prophet. And then it's a faith promoting story that's told in
brilliant.
primary.
Yeah. That is actually brilliant.
At the same time, in March of 1831, Joseph writes an epistle to the Sisters of the Relief Society, warning them against this whole spiritual wifery thing that Bennett is doing. I'll trim out some of this thing because we're getting to be too long. But he's like, we've been informed that some unprincipled men whose names we will not mention have been guilty of such crimes. We do not mention their names, not knowing that there may be some among you who are not sufficiently skilled in masonry as to keep a secret. Therefore, suffice it to say, there are those, and we therefore warn you and forewarn you in the name of the Lord, to check and destroy any faith that any innocent person may have in such character, for we do not want anyone to believe anything is coming from us, contrary to the old established morals and virtues and scriptural laws, regulating the habits and customs and conduct of society, and all persons pretending to be authorized by us or having any permit or sanction from us are and will be liars and base impostors. And you are authorized on the very first imitation of the kind to denounce them as such and shun them as a flying fiery serpent, whether they are prophets, seers, or revelators, patriarchs, 12 apostles, elders, priests, mayors, generals, city councilors, aldermen, marshals, police, lord mayors of the devil are all alike culpable and shall be damned for such evil practices. And if you yourselves adhere to anything of the kind, you also shall be damned.
That takes a lot of nerve.
It does.
Don't
Especially
you think this was from Joseph Smith warning everyone exactly the crimes he was committing? It's crazy.
Exactly. So Emma again uses this at the very end, at least cited meetings when things are about to go south. And yeah, she's trying to put the final clamp down on polygamy, and she pulls this out again.
Do you think people were laughing? Oh, sorry, Landon, go ahead.
What year was this again?
This is March 31st of 1842. So this is during the Clarissa Marvel scandal thing going on.
Okay.
And also during John C. Bennett, because those are both happening at the same time.
I would think that everyone would be laughing when that letter was read because, well, for one, a question, did the women in the Relief Society know that he was married to all of them? Or, I mean...
Well, some of them weren't married until after this. So
okay. So not everybody knew, but some knew. And they must be listening to the letter going, I mean, it's very, very duplicitous.
Yeah, so Durfee was married. We don't have a date for her, but it was sometime after between when she was sent to go check up on Clarissa Marvel and July that she gets married. She shows up at some weddings to see what, so we know that he's married by a certain time because she's there as a witness. And Eliza, or I keep wanting to say Eliza. Too many Elizas and too many.
There's a lot of Elizas, yeah.
Eliza or Snow. Yeah, a lot of women. I try to keep them all straight. All right.
How's your tally list going, Landon? Where you were? Have you lost track?
It's a mess at this point.
It's a
yeah,
mess,
I can't tell. You know, was it Elijah, Elisha, or Eliza that showed up? I don't know.
Okay, so Joseph goes into hiding, and Emma is there trying to make sure he's safe. She's going with him to make sure he's situated, and there's very clandestine things, trying to sneak out of the house because her house is being watched. So she's like going over to somebody else's house, then sneaking out the back and going off to visit Joseph and all these things.
Boy, isn't this the very thing that we were warned against in the Book of Mormon, these secret combinations and, you know, where you have to sneak around and people are being watched. And this just doesn't sound like the Book of Mormon that I grew up on, you know, that they're following that instruction by any means.
Continuing Revelation. Line upon line.
Right, milk before meat.
So Joseph's in hiding, and he write a few journal entries. Joseph writes, "I was in good spirits and much rejoiced to see my wife again." So he leaves on the 10th. The 13th he's writing this. The 16th, Joseph writes a letter to Emma. "My dear Emma, I embrace this opportunity to express to you some feelings of this morning. First of all, I take liberty to tender you my most sincere thanks for the 2 interesting and consoling visits that you have made to me during my almost exiled situation. Tongue cannot express the gratitude of my heart for the warm and true-hearted friendship you have manifested in these things towards me." Very lovely writings. So he's only been hiding for a week. She's visited him twice, and he loves it. It's great. He writes another letter to some of his other associates and says of Emma, "With what unspeakable delight and what transports of joy swelled my bosom when I took by the hand on that night my beloved Emma. She that was my wife, even the wife of my youth, and the choice of my heart. Many were the reverberations of my mind when I contemplated for a moment the many scenes that we had called to pass through. He recognized the fatigues and the toils and the sorrows and sufferings and joys and consolations from time to time which had strewed our paths and crowned our board. Oh, what a commingling of thought filled my mind for the moment. Again, she is here, even in the seventh trouble, undaunted, firm and unwavering, unchangeable, affectionate Emma.
Wow. That should be on a Valentine.
Yes. And it's great.
I look at this and I watch this back and forth and what all these, continually forgiving, but then there's always this strain. And I've asked myself many times, were they really in love, or was it more of a business relationship? And I have to think, as many times as she dealt with these things, that she really must have loved him, that she wasn't willing to leave him. And I think it was just, she saw this weakness and she lived with it. I think you see that a lot of times in royalty. You'll see the queen, deals with whatever the king is doing, and she covers it up and makes sure the king's protected. And yet, so I think there was a bond there, that they probably really loved each other, but it was kind of a dysfunctional love, really strained love at times.
And that's where it hurts, because if it's a cordial thing that you're just there for the official, the outward social aspects of it, then it doesn't hurt when you see your husband off with somebody else. But when you really love him and he's marrying all these women behind your back, that hurts hard. So it's almost more tragic because of it.
Yeah, so, I agree with that. Yeah, that for her it was. Yeah, it must have really hurt.
So that was August 16th that these letters were being passed around. August 17th, Emma finds out that the sheriff knows where Joseph Smith is, and he's getting ready to arrest him. So she runs off. I don't know if it was a ruse to try to follow her to Joseph Smith or whatever, but she manages to escape and go find Joseph and then take him to a new place to make sure he's safe. So they now have him at another barn, someplace. The Whitney,
not a barn.
Yeah.
Don't take him to a barn.
Watch out for the barns. So I think they're over. Let's see. I'll see if this quote has where it is. So that was August 17th. He gets relocated August 18th. He writes this famous letter to the Whitneys. He says, "Dear and beloved brother and sister Whitney and company, I take this opportunity to communicate some of my feelings privately at this time, which I want you three to eternally to keep in your own bosoms, for my feelings are so strong for you since what has passed lately between us." Then he commented on his loneliness. "It would afford me a great relief in mind if those with whom I am allied to love, now is the time to afford me succor. The nights are very pleasant indeed. All three of you can come and see me in the forepart of the night. Let Brother Whitney come a little ahead and knock at the southeast corner of the house at the window. It is next to the cornfield. I have a room entirely by myself. The whole matter can be attended to with most perfect safety. The only thing to be careful of is to find out when Emma comes. Then you cannot be safe. But when she is not here, there is the most perfect safety. Burn this letter as soon as you read it. Keep all locked up in your breasts. My life depends upon it. One thing I want to see you for is to get the fullness of the blessings sealed upon our heads. I think Emma won't come tonight. If she don't fail to come tonight."
Wow,
so she's
really wanted her to stay warm, didn't he? Burn the letter.
Maybe that's where burning in your bosom comes. He
Yes.
said, "Look at your bosom and burn it." Maybe that's where it comes from.
He's been in hiding for a week, and already he's bemoaning this loneliness. "Oh, I'm so lonely. Come and spend time with me. I need this." Yeah. So
well, you brought up a good thing there, because this wasn't just to her. This was to her and her parents, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of times we see not just as the woman or the girl involved, but oftentimes, especially when it's a girl, the parents are actually involved and helping with it, which again is what makes me say, how did this not get out when the parents are even involved in helping?
I think it's because the parents are groomed too. They are groomed to be okay with this and think that it's a special favor, that someone in power is showing favor on their daughter. I mean, you see that, I don't want to bring, like Michael Jackson, right? He would groom families and parents so that they would give him access to their children that normally a parent never would. But you're kind of starstruck. And I would think that Joseph was about the biggest star in Nauvoo. And so I think entire families were groomed.
Well, I'm actually reading the book by Alyssa Walls about
Stolen Innocence.
Her.
Yes.
She was the one who testified against Warren Jeffs that he married off, and it is happening all the time. In that once they learn and they're taught that this is the prophet and that your salvation depends on it, the families are giving their daughters to these men based on the prophet said to do it, so we're going to do it. And even when they see it turn out horrible and they lose their kids and their kids run away, it doesn't matter. They still back the prophet. It's just amazing to see how that works. I don't understand it, but I know it happens in other situations. So
yeah. So going along, we have Emma versus Eliza cage match. So this is now fast forward to February 1843. We know for sure on February 11th that this is when she abruptly leaves the Smith house, and everything else is speculation and fantasy and rumor and stuff. So
she had been staying there, and then abruptly on that date she's gone.
Okay. Yes.
Set the stage.
She moved in August, and now she's leaving in February. Okay. So there's probably 5 or 6 different accounts of this story. This one I'll read. Charles C. Rich called at the mansion house of Nauvoo to go to the prophet on some appointment they had together. As he waited in the main lobby or parlor, he saw the prophet Emma come down out of the room upstairs and walk together toward the stairway, which apparently came down center. Almost at the same time, a door opposite opened, and dainty little dark-haired Eliza R. Snow, she was heavy with child, came out and walked toward the center stairway. When Joseph saw her, he turned and kissed Emma goodbye, and she remained standing at the banister. Joseph then walked onto the stairway where he tenderly kissed Eliza, and then came on down the stairs towards Brother Rich. Just as he reached the bottom step, there was a commotion on the stairway, and both Joseph and Brother Rich turned quickly to see Eliza come tumbling down the stairs. Emma had pushed her in a fit of rage and jealousy. She stood at the top of the stairs, glowering, her countenance a picture of hell. Joseph quickly picked up the little lady, and with her in his arms, he turned and looked up at Emma, who then burst into tears and ran to her room. Joseph carried away the hurt and bruised Eliza up the stairs to her room. Her hip was injured, and that is why she always afterwards favored that leg, and she lost the unborn babe.
That seems pretty fantastical. I don't know.
It does, especially because it didn't move into the mansion until August 1843. That's a good 6 months after this incident was supposed to have taken place. Let's see. Also, she was teaching school, and she wouldn't be able to teaching school if she was large with child.
As a single woman, because she is a single woman living in the home. Okay.
And she didn't miss any days of teaching. So there's several different accounts of the story. None of them are entirely plausible. But people are absolutely fascinated with Eliza's infertility. They say that it was caused either by this fall down the stairs when she was pregnant, or that she was gang raped in Missouri when the militia came in and took him out. There's even a much more crude story published in another book in the 1880s or whatever, where Emma took a broom and violated her with a broom, and that's why she's sterile. There's another story of Emma hitting Eliza down the stairs with the broom. So there's a couple of stories with the broom, a lot of with the hair pulling and pushing down the stairs. But everyone's fascinated with her being infertile, and no one's happy with just sometimes women are infertile.
And is there one account that's possibly more credible than another? I mean, dates match up or eyewitness or do we just really don't know? It just kind of has taken on a life of its own.
I think that a story got out, and then people shared the story and kind of played the telephone game and went around, and
Right.
so none of them are entirely trustworthy.
Right. So
But it
all we
makes
know for
me-
sure is that she left and that she was a spiritual wife of Joseph Smith, and the rest is just kind of left up to, like you said, cage match, two women in the same house, knowing probably the details. Yeah, I can see that.
That's a really heavy story though, because you're basically, you know, that's saying that Emma basically murdered the child if she kicked it, you know, that's a hard one. And I haven't seen enough evidence to convince me that happened. It's a fantastical story. There's just, you'd think people would have known she was pregnant. It would, if she was that far along, would have been obvious. Yeah, there's just too many problems with the story to just buy that one wholesale. But yeah, certainly I've heard it. I've heard some of the other stories that you've said as well. I just don't know which if any to believe, just because of the fact that they just seem too fantastical.
Right. So that's some of the fun things about history, is that you get all these stories going around. You never know which, if any of them, are true.
But it gives you something to, you know, if one of them is true and they can get some facts and put one together, then you at least say, well, yeah, we've heard the story. Now the facts support it. But yeah, right now I just don't think there's enough facts to back any of those up.
Well, it makes me think there must be some rumors of jealousy, because that's where the stories went right away. You know, why did she leave? Oh, it was because of the love triangle, right? It wasn't some other reason. So there must have been some rumors. People must have been thinking about
It's amazing how many of these celestial marriages end up with the woman being cast out, never to return again. Right. That doesn't sound like celestial marriage that they preach every Sunday of how wonderful union it is. When everyone that he gets this celestial marriage to ends up being kicked out into the snow.
Or destitute. The snow. Were you trying to make
a pun
Eliza
there? Snow.
Were you trying to? No, I always laugh how, you know, why do they never use her two married names? Why is it always Eliza R. Snow? Why don't they say Eliza R. Snow Smith Young? I mean, that says a lot. I've never heard that.
She wrote some books later in life after Brigham Young died, and she wrote her name Eliza R. Smith on her books.
Interesting.
Well, Smith is who she was sealed to, supposedly, because Young, she was only for time, but right. Smith, it would have been for time and eternity.
Right.
Yeah. All right, so here's some more, another quick timeline breakdown. So March 4th, 1843, Joseph marries Emily Partridge in the Kimball home. March 8th, just a couple days later, he marries her sister Eliza. They do not know each other is getting married until later. Also in April 1843, William Clayton marries Margaret Moon, who is his wife's sister, and there'll be some tie-ins with Clayton and his polygamous wives with Joseph and Emma. So Margaret was engaged to Aaron Farr, who'd been away on his mission at the time, and she was in love with Aaron, and he to her, and was torn on whether she should leave and marry Aaron instead. So there'll be a lot of pining and moping around in these later journal entries I'll read.
Well, and you don't think often of the men that were victims of polygamy, you know, the men that went on missions and then their wife was forced into that situation, or the men that were engaged and were forced to give up, you know, I mean, the men are victims too.
So spring of 1843, he marries Flora Woodworth Spring. March 1st, 1843, Joseph married Lucy Walker with Eliza Partridge as a witness. May 14th, Hiram finally accepts polygamy after he was been in the dark this whole time. He was planning a scheme to entrap some polygamists, and then finally he's like, is this really anything real? And then Brigham tells him, and then
when was this that he accepted it?
May 14th.
Of what year?
43.
43.
Okay.
And why in the world, if this was the celestial principle, what everybody is, you know, trying to achieve, why would his own brother not be the first person that he said, here's what we're supposed to do, and this is going to get us celestial glory. Why?
He's also in the first presidency. He's patriarch. He's the second in command, and up until this point, he's been in the dark. So I think Joseph was just afraid that Hiram might turn on him.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe Hiram had more of a sense of morality or a conscience, or maybe, yeah, he must have sensed that it would not go over well with him, because otherwise he'd probably be the first person that you tell. If this was supposed to, you're bound for glory if you do this.
I think him and Bennett were palling around and encouraging each other, and then when it finally became open and Hiram's getting told these stories, oh brother, I've had a revelation, I've got a cover for what I've been doing. So
yeah,
I almost feel like they were trying to figure out what they could get away with, and I think you're right, encouraging each other a little bit, then they probably couldn't believe what they could get away with. They probably didn't understand the powerful hold that they had. And, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah. So
absolutely, definitely. Okay, so May 16th, Joseph visits Benjamin Johnson. He's got Eliza Partridge and William Clayton with him. He teaches instructions on the priesthood according to William Clayton. Benjamin said he was taught about plural marriage, and that night Joseph slept with Eliza. He visits Benjamin several times that spring.
So were they married at this point?
Yeah, so he married him. He married him 2 months ago. So
okay.
March 4th, she gets married. This is May 16th.
Okay.
But May 23rd is when Judge James Adams performs the marriage of Eliza and Emily in the Smith home in front of Emma. So
and that's the fake marriage.
That's the fake marriage.
And even the judge was the judge. Did he know? He probably didn't know, or did he know?
I don't know.
He would have been. I don't know. He's in Nauvoo. He would have been a Mormon judge doing whatever he was told to do by Joseph. Yeah.
All right. So, married bliss with the Partridge Sisters. Emily wrote that Emma seemed to feel well until the ceremony was over, when almost before she could draw a second breath, she turned and was more bitter in her feelings than ever before, if possible. And before that day was over, she turned around or repented of what she had done and kept Joseph up till very late in the night talking to him. She had, as it were, bound us to a ship and carried us to mid-ocean, then threw us overboard to sink or swim, as the case may be. Emma kept close watch on us. If we were missing for more than a few minutes and Joseph was not at home, the house was searched from top to bottom and from one end to the other, and if we were not found, the neighborhood was searched until we were found. So, yeah, the sisters seemed to be, once Emma found out and knew polygamy was happening, she was trying to stop anything that unseemly that would be happening.
And what a horrible situation to be in your own home. I mean, you have your husband's mistresses living there, spiritual wife, and just the incredible pain and anguish and jealousy. I don't think anyone can even imagine. It's horrible.
And the Partridge Sisters hated it too. We'll have some more.
They were all in an impossible situation. Absolutely.
Emily later testified that she roomed with Joseph the night of her second marriage while Emma was in the house at the time. And then in the William Clayton Journal of the same day, May 23rd, the president stated to me that he had a little trouble with Sister Emma. He was asking Eliza Partridge concerning Joseph Jackson's conduct during the president's absence, and Emma came upstairs. He shut the door, not knowing who it was, and held it. She came to the door and called Eliza 4 times and tried to force the door open. President opened it and told her the cause, etc. She seemed much irritated.
Much irritated. I would say that's a gross understatement. Oh my goodness. It's just a nightmare. I can't even imagine that nightmare in your own home. Or all of them.
Joseph tells William Clayton it was just, I was just talking to her about this other guy who's kind of a scoundrel in town, Joseph Jackson. But she's banging on the door, calling Eliza's name. He knows who it is. Probably just stalling for time for Eliza to get properly dressed or whatever. But it was
like he's going to go, who is it? You know what I mean? Or something. It's not. I'm sorry, we're laughing because it's so horrific. I mean, just we're not making light at all. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So then there's we have the Doctrine and Covenants 132, a statement about where if Emma shouldn't take that which was offered to her, it was just kind of a test. There's speculation on whether she was trying to choose another husband. If Joseph can have all these wives, then maybe she can have some wives too. And maybe she was approved for a short time. And then in the Revelation, you said, no, this is definitely not for you.
Right. You'll be destroyed, basically, if you try any of that. So
and rumor was it was William Law that she asked for, basically said, well, why don't I get William Law? And then he went and did the, oh no, Lord said you don't get to do that.
There is a story about William Law. He denies it later that he was ever asked, but there is in this journal entries from William Clayton, May 29th, 1843. This morning, President Joseph Smith told me that he felt as though I was not treating him exactly right and asked if I had used any familiarity with Emma. I told him by no means and explained to his satisfaction. So he's like, are you hitting on my wife? Because she seems to be, there's something going on.
And this is William Clayton that he's accusing perhaps of impropriety. So
then the next month, June 23rd, this morning, President Joseph took me and conversed considerable concerning some delicate matters. Said Emma wanted to lay a snare for me. He told me last night of this and said he felt troubled. He said Emma had treated him coldly and badly since I came, and he knew that she was disposed to be revenged on him for some things. She thought that if he would indulge himself, she would too. He cautioned me very kindly, for which I was thankful. So it sounds like when Joseph is asking, like, okay, you can marry somebody, who do you want it to be? She may have said William Clayton, and then this whole thing happened. So he's like, he's going to go after William Clayton. Like, are you hitting on my wife behind my back? Because that's not fair. You shouldn't be.
We can't have any of that.
You shouldn't have people hitting on their spouses behind someone's back. So. And now we have D&C 132, the Happy Revelation. From the journals of this time period, we got Joseph Smith and William Clayton journals for this time period. William Clayton says, Joseph reveals D&C 132, William Clayton journal. This morning I wrote a revelation consisting of 10 pages on the order of the priesthood, showing the designs of Moses, Abraham, David, and Solomon having many wives and concubines, etc. After it was wrote, President Joseph and Hiram presented it and read it to Emma, who said she did not believe a word of it and appeared very rebellious. Joseph told me to deed all the unencumbered lots to Emma and the children. He appears much troubled about Emma. Joseph Smith journal entry for the day. I in conversation with Emma most of the day.
I bet. I bet.
William Clayton on July 13th. This morning, Joseph sent for me. When I arrived, he called me into his private room with Emma, and there stated an agreement they had mutually entered into. They both stated their feelings on many subjects and wept considerably. Oh, may the Lord soften her heart that she may be willing to keep and abide his holy law. Yeah. Joseph Smith journal, July 15th, took a pleasure excursion on the Maid of Iowa from Nauvoo House Landing to the north part of the city back at dusk. So the Nauvoo house is just around the corner from the Nauvoo, or from the Homestead. So it's just like kitty corner across the block. July 15th, from the William Clayton journal, same day, Saturday made a deed for one half of the steamboat Maid of Iowa from Joseph to Emma. Also a deed to Emma for over 60 city lots.
So he's turning over all of his property to Emma.
Yes.
It's like he marries a new wife, gives her some property. It's more than a horse now.
Yeah. So Joseph is deeding a lot of lots to his polygamous wives. But at this point, every lot that he has in his power that isn't already claimed by somebody, he gives to Emma. And I'll show this little map of Nauvoo here.
He did give land to polygamous wives. His spiritual wives also received. Oh, okay.
Yes. So
interesting.
If you look through the deed of records of Nauvoo, There's a bunch of women that he's giving. I think I didn't get a list of all of them with me, but yeah, if you look at this map that I'll bring up here, all these green squares are ones that were given to Emma. Down kind of at the bottom, I've kind of green outlined in red. This is where the homestead was, the big one. The mansion is diagonally across. That's where the mansion is being built. Just to the north of that, just the very lot right next door, is Sidney Rigdon's house. And after the Nancy Rigdon episode, their neighbors, they're not talking to each other. They're pretty upset, and they're like right next to each other, kind of stuck. So that must have been fun. But all these other kind of pinkish squares, these are where I was able to find his polygamous wives' deeds being deeded to them, or where they
Were
were
they living on the properties, or they just had them in their name, probably so that it was probably more of a transaction, right?
So some of them were living there, like if their parents were, some of them like their parents lived there and they were living with their parents.
Mhm.
Some of them were given the lots, but probably didn't have the money to build a house on them.
That's so
So-
interesting because it makes me think again about grooming entire families. If there was land involved, it almost seems like quite the transaction. That's sort of sweeten the pot. If you just, it's okay that your daughter go with the prophet and the family will be compensated, and just makes it even worse.
Yeah.
Well, I believe in his book, Richard Bushman in Rough Stone Rolling, I'm pretty sure that's where I read it, mentioned that Emma was afraid that Joseph was going to leave her for all these other women. And at the time, you had no property, you had nothing. And so she basically forced him to give him, half of the steamship and then the lots, so that she would not be destitute if he left her.
And Emma was afraid, Joseph was afraid Emma was going to leave him too. So in a little minute, we'll get to talk of divorce and some scares there. Kind of a side note, diving into William's woes with Margaret Moon here. July 22nd, Aaron has come back from his mission, and Margaret's in love with this Aaron Farr guy. But she's stood true to her covenant with William Clayton. I also had some talk with him, and though the shock is severe, he endures it patiently. Margaret has also been pregnant at this time, so William Clayton got her pregnant, and she's still in love with this other guy. The hormones probably are not helping with this Aaron situation as well with pregnancy. Margaret appears July 23rd. Margaret appears dissatisfied with her situation and is miserable. I had some more talk with Margaret, and she is miserable. Find she's miserable, which makes me doubly so. I have offered to try to have her covenant released, see if she could desire it, but she's not willing. July 25th, Margaret, much as usual. That's a very painful journal entry. July 26th, I went to see Joseph. I took Aaron to talk with him and asked him some questions, whereby I ascertained that he would be willing to take her under all circumstances. So he's like, I can divorce Margaret, you can marry her. You have to take her in all circumstances because she was pregnant. But I reasoned it considerable with him to prove that I had done right on all these matters as far as I knew. I called the president out and briefly stated the situation of things, and then asked him if the covenant could be revoked. He shook his head and answered no. Something tells me that sometime Margaret will love those who she ought. So he's willing to give her up, and Joseph tells him that he can't get the divorce, which is interesting, because that divorce happens an awful lot later on in these polygamous relationships.
So everybody agreed, yes, we'll divorce, but then the higher power, the prophet, says that's not happening.
Yeah.
Keep living in your miserable state. It's what God wants.
So how this ties up to Emma. So August 6th, Emma goes to St. Louis, possibly on business related to opening the Nauvoo mansion. Since Joseph couldn't go to Missouri, she had to do all the shopping by herself. She comes back August 12th. And then William Clayton records on August 16th. Joseph told me that since Emma came back from St. Louis, she has resisted the priesthood in toto, and he had to tell her that he would relinquish all for her sake. She said she would give him Eliza and Emily Partridge, but he knew if he took them, she would pitch on him and obtain a divorce and leave him. However, he told me that he should not relinquish anything. O God, deliver thy servant from iniquity and bondage. So here's Joseph offering to give up all of his wives to appease Emma, and then, but not really willing to do it. He's like, I'll tell her I'm willing to give them all up, but I won't really do it.
But this is what he was commanded to do of God. So he's going to give up everything God told him to do now.
He's going to tell Emma that he's willing to give everything up.
Yeah. Yeah.
August 18th, 1843, again with William Clayton. Friday, I had a conversation with Brother Newell Whitney and have learned that the Farrs family are conspiring with the Walker's boys and girls, and they with Emma, to accomplish my downfall. I find they are my secret enemies, but I fear them not, for God knows the secrets of all hearts, knows mine also. I also told Margaret of this and ascertained that she had acknowledged to Aaron that I had slept with her, and if it never had been done, our union it should not be. This, of course, has given him a plea and a weapon against me. So Aaron knows all the details now, and they're conspiring to bring this whole thing down. And Emma's apparently getting roped into this or participating in this. And August is a bad time for polygamy.
You know what would have solved all of this? I don't understand why the Lord just didn't appear to Emma and tell her flat out, have a heart to heart, say, I know this is hard, but this is what needs to happen. She always got secondhand information where Joseph said, yeah, I talked to him. And he says, no, all it would take is the Lord to come to her with a flaming sword and say, Emma, right to your face, you've got to go along with this. But that never happened for some reason. I don't know why.
That's the hardest part that for me when I was studying this was that if this was really of God, the angel would have appeared just like he did to Joseph and Mary. Yep. Jesus was born, he would have appeared to Joseph and Emma instead of changing this sacred marriage covenant without telling one of the parties.
Yeah.
That was a hard thing for me.
No, that's it in a nutshell. You hit it. That's exactly right.
All right. The second half of August. Polygamy is great for everyone, or something. So this is William Clayton, August 19th. Saturday, Margaret says Diantha Farr said she believed that Margaret Tenaya was vexed at her and felt disposed to go to almost every house in the city and tell all she knew and then come home and kill herself. August 21st, Monday, Emma asked if I handed 2 letters to Joseph, which she showed to me. I had not done it. I satisfied her I had not. They appeared to be from Eliza R. Snow, and President Joseph found them in his pocket. Emma seemed very vexed and angry. So she catches Joseph with these love notes from Eliza R. Snow. Again, she's even more pissed off at her dear friend Eliza and Joseph. August 23rd, President told me that he had difficulty with Emma yesterday. She rode up to the Woodsworths with him and called us while he came to the temple. When he returned, she was demanding the gold watch of Flora. He reproved her for her evil treatment. On their return home, she abused him much, and well so when he got home. He had to use harsh measures to put a stop to her abuse, but finally succeeded. And this is another really painful journal entry. So Emma recognizes the gold watch. Apparently, Eliza Snow had one as well. And she sees a woman, a young girl, teenager, Flora Woodworth, and knows that Joseph has married her, and she's upset about it. And then Joseph has to use harsh measures to get her to settle down.
I don't even want to think what those were. And again, why isn't God telling her that it's what he wants? It's just, I don't even have words at this point.
Then things get a little scandalous here on August 24th. So William Clayton's at his house. He's got his 2 wives there, and he also has, I think, his mother living there as well. So at night, I asked Mother if Margaret might sleep with Ruth and me. She appeared very rebellious and would not consent, but said we might do as we had a mind. So that's interesting.
Meaning actually share the same room. And he asked his mother?
Yes.
Is it okay if, oh my, what is happening in Nauvoo? I'm not kidding. You need to write that romance novel, or it wouldn't even be romance. It'd be more like a horror story. Good heavens.
Okay, then August 28th, William Clayton writes, President Joseph met Miss Woodworth at my house. And then the next day, August 29th, Tuesday morning at the temple, President Joseph at my house with Miss Woodsworth. So Joseph is going to people's houses and spending time with his wives. And so it looks like William Clayton's house was a place to crash with his wives outside of the view of Emma.
And some of them live with their parents. So again, family's all on board. He's just, and from that map, all the houses were very close. He's just basically going door to door.
Yeah, yeah.
I see how the home teaching program got started, you know.
You think that's the ministering program?
Oh, there's Brother Joseph doing his home teaching again.
No, it probably started because I said, why is Brother Joseph always going door to door? And he's like, I have an idea for a new program. You have to go door to door and report back.
Ministry visits, yes. So August 31st, the Smiths move into the Nauvoo mansions. They're finally going out of their homestead. They get this nice, really big place. And immediately Emma spends the next 2 weeks deathly ill. She's got malaria, and this brush with death may have changed some of her thoughts and concerns. Maybe she made a promise with God that she would be more accepting if she would just live. Something happened with this 2 week period where she's finally kind of on board with something, but not all the way. But she wants these saving ordinances that Joseph's been telling her all about.
Because at this point, they are not sealed.
Right, they've been sealed.
They have been sealed. Okay, because I
sealed.
know she was the 20. Is it third or second? I can't remember. Wife to be sealed. She was not sealed right away.
Yeah, it was like a few days after the Partridge Sisters were married to him. So she got to watch the Partridge Sisters get married.
And then
5 days later, she got.
Well, and kind of the thought is that he withheld that until she would agree, as he sealed himself to woman after child after woman, and then finally, which is why she's numbered. Is it 22 or 23? Do you remember? I can't remember.
It was like 23.
I think I remember someone having a T-shirt with that on it, just very impactful. So the saving ordinances she's talking about are
endowments, washing and anointings.
So you could be sealed without being endowed.
Yeah.
At that point, okay.
I thought it was the second anointing that she got.
She got endowed, she got sealed, she got the first and second anointing. So all these things kind of happened at the end of September.
Okay, so she basically probably made a pact with God. If I live, I'm going to be okay with everything, and I want to have my calling and election made sure.
Yeah.
There you go.
Interestingly enough, at the end of this 2 week period, September 15th, William Clayton says, President Joseph Smith told me he had lately had a new item of law revealed to him in relation to myself. He said the Lord had revealed to him that a man could only take two of a family, except by express revelation. So if Joseph wanted more than two, he could. As I had said, I intended to take Lydia Moon. He made this known for my benefit. To have more than two in a family was apt to cause wrangles and trouble. He finally asked if I would not give Lydia to him. I said I would, so far as I had anything to do in it. He requested me to talk to her. So
he's cutting off all the other men. They can only have two because we're running out of women and teenagers. But because he can receive that revelation over and over, can have as many as he wants.
Yeah. So 2 days later, September 17th, I had some talk with Lydia. She seemed to receive it kindly, but says she promised her mother not to marry while her mother lives, and she thinks she won't do it. So that's an interesting excuse to get out of marrying Joseph.
Yes.
I like that, although I would think maybe somebody mysteriously, the mother might disappear at that point.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
Crew might show up at the house.
The Danites out there.
That's right.
So then September 20th, Wednesday rode out to his farm, a very warm wind south. Elsewhere, I find that at Joseph's farm, this is Joseph's, he has a farm outside of town that he runs. He actually has the lots that run the farm for him. So he goes out to the farm, marries the lot's daughter, Melissa. Also, Melissa's parents, Cornelius and Parmelia, were sealed, and they operated the farm for him. So this is the last really known love marriage that Joseph had. I have a couple of pictures here of the mansion house. The first one is this really old photo while they still have the hotel wing built on. So they first kind of built the mansion, and then they built on a hotel wing for more people. And then the modern picture shows it all nice and pretty and without the hotel wing. So this is where they moved into in August of 1843. All right. So from Joseph Smith's journal, September 28th, 1843, Joseph Smith was by common consent and unanimous voice chosen president of the quorum, probably the quorum of the anointed, and anointed and ordained to be the highest and holiest order of the priesthood and companion. Emma Smith now attended meetings of this council. So there's this other quorum called the Quorum of the Anointed. All the people that had their endowments were part of this. Emma is the first woman involved in this. And so this is the first real quorum that women get to be part of. October 15th.
That was just top tier. That was absolutely top tier, right? You had worked your way through, and that was very special top tier group. Interesting.
Yeah. Interesting side note, on October 15th, Joseph gives a sermon from the temple construction site on the economy of this city. He says, I think there are too many merchants among you, more wool and raw materials, and the money be brought to pay the poor for manufacturing, set our women to work, and stop their spinning street yarn and talking about spiritual wives. I proclaim that in the name of the Lord God, I have nothing but virtue, integrity, and uprightness. So he wants to stop the gossiping by giving the women jobs.
Well,
So he
that's
was pro
amazing,
women's
since
rights.
we were told not to work outside the home when I was growing up.
Right.
Yes. So October 16th is an interesting journal entry about home attending to family concerns. And that's all that Joseph Smith says in his journal there. Okay, William Clayton on October 19th says, Thursday after we got on the road, he began to tell me that Emma has turned quite friendly and kind. She had been anointed, and he had been anointed king. He said that it was her advice that I should keep Margaret at home, and it was also his counsel. Says he should just keep her at home and brook it, and if they raise trouble about it and bring you before me, I will give you an awful scourging and probably cut you off from the church, and then I will baptize you and set you his head as good as ever. So this is with Margaret Moon. She's obviously starting to show now at their pregnancy. And if people call him out on this, then Joseph will have to excommunicate him, but it'll bring him back in, not to worry about it. But it's interesting that Emma has turned friendly about this, and it also recommends Margaret staying with William. So
well, it's one of the few women that are not married to Joseph. So of course she's friendly, right? She's with someone else.
Yeah, maybe she's more worried about Margaret's reputation if she's seen as being pregnant. Right. So maybe she's more protective of him than she is of agreeing that with the marriage of Emma, or of Margaret and William. So about this time, we don't have a date for this story, but it could be there on that July 16th, where Joseph said he was about attending home to family concerns. But Emily Partridge wrote in the Life Incidents, I do not know why she gave us to him unless she thought we were where she could watch us better than some others outside of the house. She wanted us immediately divorced, and she seemed to think that she only had to say the word and it was done. But we thought different. We looked upon the covenants we had made as sacred. She afterwards gave Sarah and Maria Lawrence to him, and they lived in the house as his wives. I knew this, but my sister and I were cast off. She sent us one day to come to her room. Joseph was present, looking like a martyr. Emma said some very hard things. Joseph should give us up, or blood should flow. She would rather her blood run pure than be polluted in this manner, and such interviews were quite common. So Emma's often bringing them in and telling him all of this, grilling him on what they're doing with Joseph and everything else. But the last time she called us into her room, I felt quite indignant and was determined that it should be the last, for it was becoming monotonous. And I was ashamed to say that I felt indignant towards Joseph for submitting to Emma. But I see now that he could do no different. When we went in, Joseph was there. His countenance was the perfect picture of despair. I cannot remember all that passed at the time, but she insisted that we should promise to break our covenants that we had made before God. Joseph asked her if we made her promise she required, if we made her the promise she required, if she would cease to trouble us and not persist us in marrying someone else. She made the promise. Joseph came to us and shook hands with us with the understanding that all had ended between us. So I guess the handshake was all you needed for a divorce.
Well, when you weren't legally married
Yeah,
to
yeah.
begin with.
I know we keep saying wife, we keep saying marriage. None of that was real. You got to keep reminding yourself of that. None of that was legal.
So she goes on to say, after our interview was over, we went downstairs. Joseph soon came into the room where I was and said, "How do you feel, Emily?" My heart still being hard, I answered him rather short, and that I expected I felt as anybody would under the circumstance. He said, "You know, my hands are tied." And he looked as if he was to sink into the earth. I knew he spoke truly, and my heart was melted. All my hard feeling was gone in a moment towards him, but I had no time to speak, for he was gone. Emma was on his track and came in as he went out. She said, "Emily, what did Joseph say to you?" I answered, "He asked me how I felt." She said, "You might as well tell me, for I am determined that a stop shall be put to these things, and I want you to tell me what he says to you." I replied, "I shall not tell you. He can say what he pleases to me, and I shall not report it to you. There has been mischief enough made by doing that, and I am sick of these things as you can be." And I said it in a tone that she knew I meant it.
Emily.
So, yeah, so
You don't hear that quote in Relief Society or that letter written. You just don't hear that very often.
It was published in Life Incidents. I think this was letters, or it's kind of a story, of her life that she gave to her family. It's hard finding copies of this.
I imagine it is. Yeah, they don't put that in the ensign and talk about what had transpired in the home. They just want to act like there was just him and Emma all the time.
Yeah. So that was also about the same time. I think it's somewhere between August and October that this happened. I'm leaning more towards October because of that journal entry from Joseph. And also about that same time, Eliza R. Snow writes a poem commiserating to the Partridge Sisters. I think that was around October 17th or so that she writes this poem. So
well, because an ode to being kicked out maybe is what the poem said, right? Because they all have that in common. So
yeah, she knows what it's like to be kicked out of the Smith
right.
and face Emma's wrath.
And to have Joseph say, "I'm sorry, baby, there's nothing I can do."
It almost seems that Emma's wrath is worse than God's wrath because he seems more afraid of that.
That's right. But poor Emma was in a possible situation.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to understand, to be placed in that situation, I can't even imagine the mental torment that poor woman was going through. It must have just been a living hell.
Yeah. And also on October 19th, Joseph says that Emma's now much happier and she's much more pleasant. So at least definitely by the 19th, the girls are out because she's happy that they're gone. Okay, so now we have another fun story. I've titled this slide, "Emma Smith in the Kitchen with the Strychnine."
Like Clue, right?
Yes,
Which your background resembles, I think, the lounge in the Clue game, doesn't it?
Not in the library.
In the library, that's right.
So Joseph Smith's journal says November 5th, 1843, was taken suddenly sick at the dinner table, went to the door and vomited all dinner, jaws dislocated, raised fresh blood, every symptom of poison, prayer meeting at the evening at the hall over the store, and then in code, Joseph did not dress nor Emma. So this is a prayer circle. So they would be dressed up in their temple garbs, except for Joseph and Emma did not participate. As you know, you're supposed to be in good feelings with everyone there. and Joseph thinks that he was just poisoned by his wife. Richard Bushman writes of this poisoning accusation that through the late fall and winter of 1843 and 44, Joseph and Emma's relationship broke down only once. During his Sunday dinner on November 5th, Joseph became ill, rushed to the door, and vomited so violently he dislocated his jaw. Every symptom of poison, Richards noted in Joseph's diary. That night at the prayer meeting, Richards wrote in code that Joseph and Emma did not dress, a sign that they were too much at odds to participate. The next day, Richards wrote that Joseph was busy with domestic concerns. Years later, in the anti-Emma atmosphere of Utah, Brigham Young spoke of a meeting where Joseph accused his wife of slipping poison into his coffee. Brigham interpreted Emma's refusal to answer as an admission of guilt. Although there probably was an argument the poisoning accusation was unfounded, Joseph was susceptible to vomiting anyway. He had even dislocated his jaw while vomiting once before. And 5 weeks after the 1843 dinner episode, he was sick again, vomiting more violently than ever. But during this last bout, Joseph said gratefully, "My wife waited on me." So it's more likely that he was just ill, had a bad reaction.
But the fact that he could imagine that as
Yes.
a possibility definitely
Yes.
gives you a little window into the relationship. And how unusual. I know a lot of things about the prophet Joseph Smith, but I did not know he had a propensity for vomiting. I'm going to have to add that to the list when I try to visualize him.
Well, he vomited a lot of prophecies there in the Doctrine and Covenants.
I imagine he was under a lot of stress with everything going on, all his wives, all this drama in the house, and everything else going on. Probably an ulcer formed and everything.
Because it said blood. You're right. It probably was an ulcer. Oh my goodness. Okay. Interesting.
So Emma did fight polygamy. January 1844, we're coming the last couple of months. Now that she's been anointed, she's doing all the temple work for the other women, all the washing and anointings and stuff. So Emma's doing all of this, and she's meeting with a lot of women as she's doing this. So according to an affidavit of Bathsheba Smith, George A. Smith's wife, I think he was a cousin of Joseph Smith or something, Emma is busy with administering the woman's portion of the temple ordinances. Bathsheba Smith remembers Emma telling her during one of these sessions, "Your husbands are going to take more wives, and unless you consent to it, you must put your foot down and keep it there." So she's warning him, you gotta, if you don't want your husbands to take wives, you gotta put your foot down and stop them, otherwise they're gonna do it. John Taylor recalled in 1876, Emma Smith at first professed having faith in the revelation on celestial marriage, but afterwards forsook it. Using her influence to pervert the minds of the sisters and set it against them, she tried it with my wife, Lenora. She told me many things that Emma Smith had told her. Well, when I met Joseph, I said, "Brother Joseph, do you know that Sister Emma has been talking thus and so to my wife and telling her such and such things? And you said that you have denied the revelation yourself?" And Joseph replied, "Brother Taylor, Sister Emma would dethrone Jehovah himself if she could do it for the accomplishment of her purposes." So
another quote that you never hear.
Interestingly, this was a report of the dedication of the Kaysville Relief Society house in November 1876.
Wow. Yeah, I'm blown away. She has her second anointing at this point, right? So she's like,
that's true. She can go rogue. It doesn't
nothing
matter.
she can do wrong at this point. So why not?
Yep. All right. A young woman visiting from Carthage reported, "My sister went into a hotel parlor to await the call to breakfast." This is the Joseph Smith mansion. 10 or 12 young women were assembled there, laughing and talking. Mrs. Emma Smith presently joined them, and recognizing my sister, whom she'd met before, entered into a conversation with her. Upon my sister asking, "Mrs. Smith, where does your church get this doctrine of spiritual wives?" Her face flushed scarlet, her eyes blazed, and she replied, "Straight from hell, madame." Some of the young women
that is my favorite quote so far.
Some of the young women blushed, others giggled, and still others were stolid and indifferent.
Well, there's a testimony of its truthfulness for you.
That's right. She's very feisty. She's
She
just
is.
dealing with these just horrible, and then she's vilified for over 100 years. It's just, I don't know.
Brigham is famous for quote saying that Joseph told him that if he would go through hell to get his wife to save her, and Brigham said that's exactly where he'll have to go to find her. So he had a lot of affection for Emma.
Yeah. Well, she took him on later on. Maybe we'll have to do an episode of that because her fight against Brigham Young was legendary.
So February of 1844, Hiram files a lawsuit against Orsimus Botswick over his slanderous claims about Hiram and various women of Nauvoo. The quote was, he could take half a bushel of meal and get whatever accommodation he wanted with almost any woman in the city. So this is what Orsimus was saying.
Goodness.
And so Hiram filed a lawsuit against slander, and Joseph has W.W. Phelps write a voice of innocence in Nauvoo. So this is another denial of polygamy and how everyone's virtuous and lovely and all these things are slanderously said. So Emma makes some edits to this letter and then reads it to the Relief Society in a series of meetings. She also reads the letter that Joseph wrote for the Relief Society that was read earlier in March 1842. So there's this house of innocence, and she wants all the Relief Society women to hear this message. This is March of 1844. And so they can't fit them all in one meeting, so they have 4 separate meetings. And the notes here from this minutes, March 16th, 1844, again read the epistle in defense of the virtues female part of the community of Nauvoo, exhorted them to cleanse their hearts and ears, and said the time had come when we must throw the mantle of charity around to shield those who will repent and do so no more. Spoke of John C. Bennett's spiritual wife system, that some taught it as the doctrine of Brother Joseph. She advised all to abide the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and then read the epistle of Joseph Smith, rewritten in the Book of Records, so that letter, or even if the prophet tells you don't believe it. And of course, the Book of Mormon says in Jacob how you should have more than one wife, and then D&C there's the same revelation.
Right, it's so problematic because prior to the 132, there were several places where they said that's a no-no. Do not do that.
She's saying abide by the rules as described in the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants.
Right.
And this letter that I have directly from Joseph. 1 o'clock, she calls the last meeting. And again addressed, the society read both the former epistles, desired none should lift their hand or voice to adopt the principles, unless they were willing to maintain their integrity through time and eternity. Said these contain the principles the society started upon, but was sorry to have to say all have not adhered to them. She again exhorted to follow the teachings of President Joseph Smith from the stand. Follow his public teachings, not his private ones. Follow him from the stand.
That kind of a code?
Yeah. That there could be not any stronger language used than what was just read. That these are the words of Brother Joseph, her husband, etc. Said she wanted to see a reformation in both men and women, also exhorted to look after the poor, also to examine the conduct of their leaders of the society, that you may sit in judgment on their heads. And said, if there was ever any authority on earth, she had it and had it yet. She's making it very clear that she's been given all the authority. They're doing blessings of healing in the society. She's got all these temple ordinances. She has some authority, especially as Joseph gave her, set her apart as the president of the society. She has this authority. She still has it. Make sure you're following what I'm telling you and what Joseph Smith is publicly telling you and what we have in our scriptures.
Do you think she's alluding that she has some form of priesthood authority? I mean, she's performing ordinances and she's...
There's arguments to be made that they thought they had a form of priesthood power at that time.
Right. And I've heard that too, that the women did. And then when Brigham Young was in power, that was completely stripped away. That's very interesting.
So the minutes of the Relief Society have been off limits and locked up in the vault for many, many years up until just recently with the Joseph Smith projects. paper
Wow.
project. So, yeah,
There's probably a lot more in there. If someone were to really go through, there are probably a lot of truth there. How interesting.
yeah. I think Emma didn't show up for most of the meetings in 1843, and so I haven't read much of those, but I know she didn't appear in those. All the really exciting stuff is at the beginning and the end. So here's the conclusion of that Voice of Innocence in Nauvoo that W. Phelps wrote and Emma edited. Resolved unanimously that while we render credence to the doctrines of Paul, that neither the man is without the woman, neither the woman without the man in the Lord, yet we raise our voices and hands against John C. Bennett's spiritual wife system as a scheme of profligates to seduce women, and they that harp upon it wish to make it popular for the convenience of their own cupidity. Wherefore, while a marriage bed undefiled and honorable, let polygamy, bigamy, fornication, adultery, and prostitution be frowned out of the hearts of honest men to drop in the gulf of fallen nature, where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched. And let all the saints say amen. So this is what she read at that last meetings, and they even published this in the paper. And Joseph Smith read this as well at the grove in front of the temple. Later, he claimed that he didn't have any problem until this Voice of Innocence issue came up with the women. So
It sounds like she read that with some kind of hellfire and brimstone. You can just hear her pounding the pulpit and decrying polygamy, and my goodness.
So this did not endear the Relief Society or Emma to Brigham Young afterwards. So March 1845, Brigham Young said before the 70s, relative to the things which any of our sisters have been engaged in, that they have no right to meddle in the affairs of the kingdom of God. They never can hold the keys of the priesthood apart from their husbands. When I want sisters or the wives or the members of the church to get up Relief Society, I will summon them to my aid. But until that time, let them stay at home. And if you see females huddling together, veto the concern. And if they say Joseph started it, tell him it is a damned lie, for I know he never encouraged it.
That's
Later,
interesting, the wording of that, because it almost makes it sound at the beginning that he's saying, I'm taking away the keys, that they do not have them anymore. I mean, you could read it that way. That's
yeah. And later he told that same day, he says, I will curse every man that lets his wife or daughters meet again until I tell them. What are Relief Societies for? To relieve us of our best men. They relieved us of Joseph and Hiram, and that is what they will lead.
so this is after their death.
Yes, this is 1845.
This is 18. Okay, so this is now he's in charge, and he's going to put an end to women congregating together, and the Relief Society's over, and you're not going to be talking anti-polygamy anymore.
Yeah, so Relief Society doesn't start up again for another decade in Utah.
Right.
There's some arguments to be made that this is just Brigham talking to the men. He didn't tell the women that Relief Society was banned, and he seemed to still talk to them as they're preparing, doing sewing and stuff for the temple. So there's argument to be made that he didn't ban Relief Society, but he did not at all like it here. So Emily Partridge Young said of Emma as Relief Society president, she took occasion from the president to work upon the sisters' feelings and cause them to betray their brethren who were in polygamy, and in that way brought about much trouble for Joseph and his true-hearted brethren. That was also from Emily Partridge Young from the Incidents. Mormon Enigma has a lot of good information on this.
Yeah.
And then just to kind of wrap up, that's the end of what we have for Emma's reactions. Just to wrap things up, April 18th, William Law was excommunicated. May 23rd, William Law bore testimony to a grand jury in Carthage that Joseph Smith was an adulterer with Maria Lawrence and other women unknown, and a warrant is issued for his arrest. May 26th, Joseph declares, as famously, what a thing is it for a man to be accused of committing adultery and having 7 wives when I can only find one? I think that's what the church now calls a carefully worded denial.
Yes. Was it written by a lawyer?
June 7th, Nauvoo Expositor is printed by William Law. June 10th, Nauvoo Expositor is destroyed by order of Joseph. June 12th, Thomas Sharp, the editor of the Warsaw Signal, writes, "War and extermination is inevitable. Citizens, arise, one and all. Can you stand by and suffer such infernal devils to rob men of their property and rights without avenging them? We have no time for comment. Every man will make his own. Let it be made with powder and ball." So he's credited with drumming up the mob that killed Joseph in Carthage. June 18th, Joseph declares martial law, calls out the militia, which adds treason to the charges against him besides just destroying the press. June 25th, Joseph and Hiram surrender, and June 27th, Hiram and Joseph are killed. So that's the story of Emma and Joseph.
That's the story. So at the end of her life, did she ever speak again about polygamy, or do we have any record of any of her sentiments later? I know that she stayed behind. She did not want any of her children involved in the practices. She wanted to distance herself completely. Was there any more?
She did not write a journal herself, so we have very few words that she wrote. We have some letters between her and Joseph. So most of what I have here is just stuff that people saw her reacting to, or the minutes of everything. So
right. Not first party accounts, but second party accounts. So that's interesting. She didn't keep a journal.
She raised her children, insisting that Joseph was not a polygamist. Mm-hmm. She denied to her dying day that there was anything to do with polygamy. She wanted nothing to do with Brigham Young and polygamy, and made sure her sons didn't believe their husband had anything to do with it, so that they didn't start up. So they followed James Strang for a little while, and then he started polygamy as well up on Beaver Island.
As everyone eventually does. It just seems to happen. I don't understand.
So she wanted to make sure that when her sons started their religion, Joseph, they started the RLDS church,
right,
now called the Community of Christ. But she didn't want them picking up this doctrine, and so she denied anything to do with it, with her and Joseph. So that Joseph spent a lot of his time going back and forth to Utah later on in life, and a lot of the information and proof that we have of polygamy is because Joseph was trying to figure it out, and all the people in Utah are drumming up all these affidavits and witnesses and wives that said would testify of everything. So a lot of the proof that we have comes from that.
And of course, his mother was telling him different, saying your father never did it, but he's in Utah, and everyone's saying this is how it is, and it's his legacy, and he started it. So
So the RLDS church insisted that there was no polygamy with Joseph for most of their existence. Interestingly, the first time I heard about polygamy with Joseph was I was doing a mini mission in Wisconsin, and we met somebody who was from the RLDS church, and he said that Joseph may have been married to another woman, a young girl or something. And that was the first time I'd ever heard anything, and I didn't really hear anything again until just a couple of years ago. I started doing research and digging into everything, and I was just floored how much that was kept out of the correlated history.
Right. And now you can find it a lot easier. It's in the gospel topic essays. It's pretty much discussed, although not details often. And I think they try not to mention ages, because that can be really problematic, or marrying women that are already married, that can be problematic. So, but I know there are other branches, the Snufferites for one, who Landon and I just saw Who Killed Joseph Smith Part 2. And of course, they do not believe that Joseph, Emma, or Hiram, practiced at all, and instead spent their life denouncing it. And of course, the theory there is, that, well, Brigham Young did confiscate all the journals, right, when everybody got during part of the Reformation in Utah. So everything's like a trumped up charge. So it's still a mystery today. There's still a lot of discussion around it. So Landon, do you have any final thoughts? I've done a lot of the talking and the being incensed. Do you have any final thoughts on this? This has been such a great conversation with Ron. Just
Well, I think one thing that a lot of people, I didn't realize, was that the other women who weren't Emma that were married to him upon his death, Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball married. They basically forced them to marry them for time, not for eternity, because they were already sealed to Joseph. But all the wives that were known other than Emma got sealed to Brigham or Heber C. Kimball. I kind of think it would have been a kind of fun to see Emma sealed to Brigham and see how that turned out.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, Heber and Brigham got the bulk of them. There were a few that were farmed out to some other apostles.
Yeah.
And some didn't marry anybody else after that. But yeah. The other 14-year-old girl, Nancy Winchester, went to Heber Kimball. I think she and Helen Mar Kimball might have been friends. They were about the same age, probably friends. So that must have been weird having a friend your age being sealed to your dad.
Father,
Your
yeah.
dad. It makes,
As a young teenager.
You're the stepmother. There you go. No, and I always think how they say, well, one of the proofs, of course, against Joseph's polygamy is that there aren't any children that are known, for whatever reasons. There are different theories on that, abortion or whatever. But I always think and so that they say that means he probably was not intimate with them. But I still think even if he was not intimate with them, he took them out of play in the world. He took a 14-year-old girl who never had a chance to, go on a date, get married, have their own family, and he did it over and over again. I mean, and that's the best case scenario, that he did marry them for some kind of a, adoption process or dynastic. But even then, that's an atrocity too, just to take someone out of the natural course of their life.
Yeah. Yep.
I think so. So, all right. Have we said it all? There's really not a way to end on a positive note,
No,
except for to
it's
say
not.
that, there's a lot of information. There are a lot of journals, and I feel like more information may come out. A lot of things are being made public, like you said, Ron, that have not been seen before, the minutes of Relief Society, and these are all being put out there for people like Ron who have the time to go through and synthesize it for the rest of us. So I guess we'll end there, and we'll just
make a few plugs for some books where I got a lot of my information.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead and list some of them. That's great. Sources
The
are
Mormon Enigma is one of the most famous books with a lot of this information. Okay. Get the new paperback version. The hardback was made before Mark Hoffman, so there were just a couple of things that made it into the original copy.
A few little things that Mark Hoffman added, yeah.
She points them out in this book, the new version. So get the newer version.
Okay.
An Intimate Chronicle by the Journal of William Clayton. This is a fabulous book. A lot of the journal entries and stuff I got pulled out of this directly. Also, Joseph Smith Journal from the Joseph Smith Papers Project. I got a lot of those notes. So I'm kind of getting these narrative stories, and I'm looking them up in the journals and trying to find all these interesting entries that match up and kind of made this a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
John C. Bennett, The Saintly Scoundrel. This is a fantastic book. I think John C. Bennett's my favorite character from this time. He just comes in with all these grandiose ideas, and he's got a major complex of he just wants greatness out of life, and he thinks that, and he almost pulls it off. He has his highlight in his life. Mayor, first presidency of the church, general in the militia, and everything, and he's got the whole world at his feet until he gets caught.
Till he gets excommunicated.
And then you can't really say much about polygamy without looking at In Sacred Loneliness by Todd Compton. So those are some of the main sources. There's a new version, a companion to this, the original documents that he pulled all the source material from. That's just came out a few months ago. So those are all fantastic and highly recommended if you want to learn more on this topic.
Oh yeah, no, thank you for sharing those. And we'll definitely put the titles in the show notes. I think, Landon, you've read some of those. I've read some, but certainly not all. And that's why we really appreciate you kind of synthesizing everything together and putting it in such a really interesting timeline. And the slides are really informative too. So thank you so much, Ron. And we wish you great luck on Masterpiece Mormonism. We will be looking for that. And when it does come out, I think we're close. We'll definitely put some information out about it on Mormonish podcast on Facebook and our other sites, because this is going to be great. I'm telling you, everybody, he has a mind like a steel trap. It is all in there, and he can tell us, what it would take us months to read, right, in just one little episode. So, all right, I guess we'll say goodbye for now from Mormonish, signing off. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Landon. And we will see you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mormonish. We really appreciate our listeners and would love to hear from you if you have a story you'd like to share. You can email us at mormonishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, mormonishpodcast.org. And don't forget to look for us on YouTube and like and subscribe. Keep joyful, everybody.